And the first main event we're going to be discussing is the Munich Putsch of 1923. So by 1923, the Nazis were still a minority party. They were in around 2% or 4% of the Reichstag. Hitler had given them a high profile. Hitler had made it very popular, but still they were a minority. So in November of 1923, Hitler had believed that the moment had come for him to topple the Weimar government. Um, Now, on 8th November specifically, Hitler carried out this push, and the main reason, the very specific reason behind that, was because the Weimar government, specifically Gustav Stresemann's government, was preoccupied. They were occupied with the Ruhr crisis. So at this time in 1923, Germany was in a severe state of hyperinflation because of French and Belgian troops stated in the Ruhr region. So they were actually trying to find a solution to that. They were occupied. The entire country was falling apart. The economy was falling apart. People lost their savings. So this is when Hitler actually thought that it would be the easiest for them to take over Munich. So what they actually wanted was they wanted to take over Bavaria, which was actually the entire state in Germany. They thought that if they take over the government of Bavaria, they can somehow take over the country and reverse the country from a democracy to their 25 points National Socialist agenda. So on 8th of November, Hitler hijacked a local government meeting and he announced that he was taking over the government of Bavaria. Now he was joined by the old war hero Ludendorff. So what this means here is that he actually went to it's also known as the beer hall putsch because he actually went to a beer hall, which is where these people were having a meeting, and he very swiftly just walked inside with the brown shirts, with the hundreds of brown shirts that had been with them, and he declared that he is going to lead Germany. He's going to take over Bavaria. So the Nazi stormtroopers, the SA or the brown shirts, many of them were under the command of Ernst Rem. Now, this is a very important name. Ernst Rem was the leader of the SA. He was also the founder of the SA, and he was a very close ally to Hitler. So he began taking over official buildings. The next day, however, the Weimar government forces hit back. Police rounded up the stormtroopers, and in a very brief exchange of shots, 16 Nazis were killed, and the police were called. Um, so what basically happened in depth here was that Hitler marched into the building where three main officers of Bavaria, three main politicians actually, they were having a meeting there. Now Hitler basically held them hostage until they actually admit that Hitler will become the leader of Bavaria. And they didn't. At first they didn't, and then they decided that yes, we will let Hitler do this. So what happened was Ernst Rem, Hitler had given him the task of actually going to every single building in that area and take over those buildings. And what would happen is Rem had a flare with him. So what he would do is he would blast the flare if all the buildings are taken over by the Nazis, by him and the stormtroopers. And then the moment Hitler would receive that flare, we would see that signal. It would be then that Hitler would actually arrest or held him captive and actually declare himself the leader of Bavaria. However, this failed, and this was because the three politicians actually they escaped. They did admit, but they did admit to Hitler and to accepting Hitler as the leader of Bavaria. But what happened was when Hitler escaped, when Hitler actually left the hall for a few hours to go to Ernst Röhm and actually check what was happening outside, and to claim that it was a success, the three politicians actually escaped. Stormtroopers weren't noticing, and while they were noticing, these three politicians escaped, and this turned into a disaster for Hitler. Now, the Weimar government was actually pretty quick. At this time in 1923, the Nazi Party wasn't as popular, and they didn't really have the funds to hire brown shirts or the SA, or paramilitary troops or stormtroopers. So these stormtroopers were actually outnumbered because within a day, the Weimar Republic knew. They started to know about what's happening here. And so the police came, the military came, they very, very swiftly killed 16 Nazis. And they also tried to take over Hitler, kill Hitler. But what happened was Hitler narrowly escaped. He got shot in his stomach, and he was kind of paralyzed. But what he did was he escaped in the car with one of the people one of the leaders of the Nazi party, with him. However, in a few days, he was captured. Even though he escaped, he was captured by the Weimar government and he was set up for a trial. Now, when we talk about the aftermath of the Munich Putsch, right, like what actually happened, was this a disaster, and what really happened during this trial? So, in the short term, the Munich Putsch was a disaster for Hitler. He had severely miscalculated the mood of the German people. He had miscalculated everything, the smartness of the stormtroopers for even letting those people out of their sight. Moreover, more specifically, this had been a humiliation for the Nazi government, Nazi party. The Nazis were kind of popular, but they still only held 4% of votes in the Reichstag, and this was their time to shine, to show the country that they would be a competent government for to govern the country, and they had miserably failed. It had shown that they were nothing but a weak and aggressive force. Now, in the long term, however, this actually turned out to be a very good deal for Hitler and the Nazis. There's only one reason behind it, and that's because they gained popularity. At this time, there were 20 or 30 political parties in the Reichstag, and it was very, very hard and difficult for all of them to stand out. So the Munich Putsch, which wasn't really done before, there were only around 2 to 3 main coups, such as the Spartacist Revolution, the Munich Putsch, and the Freikorps Revolution, which was also known as the Kapp-Putsch. So Hitler made a name for himself. Sure, it wasn't a positive name, it was actually a very negative name. But people now came to know about the 25-point program and about the Nazi Party, especially among the right wing, which was huge in Germany. Germany was full of townsfolks and people from the villages. That means that the Nazi Party gained popularity. Now they would just have to make a better reputation, but they knew that people now knew about the party, which was the more important part. Now, what happened for Hitler, though? He did not get punished. Well, he did get punished, but not a lot. So Hitler actually impressed the judges at his trials. Some people say that he bribed the judges or he had a very good political background, but it's assumed that Hitler impressed the judges so much that he and his accomplices got off very lightly. Ludendorff, he got freed altogether. And that's because Ludendorff was a very decorated general from one of the fronts in the First World War, so they didn't want to hold him captive for service. So Ludendorff was actually freed, and Hitler was only given 5 years in prison, even though the legal guidelines said that high treason should carry a life sentence. So that means Hitler could have died. They could have killed Hitler like they did for many members of the Spartacist Revolution, namely Rosa Luxemburg and Karl Liebknecht, but they didn't. Hitler was only given 5 years in prison, but the funny thing is that Hitler only served 9 months of the sentence, and he did so in great comfort in the Landsberg Castle. This means that he was actually supposed to serve. He was actually supposed to die, but he convinced the judges with a speech. Actually, what he did was, while he was on trial, he, instead of pleading guilty or supporting his on guilt, what he actually did was entertain his views, because he knew that this was going to get broadcasted to the public through radios or television or maybe even newspapers. It was broadcasted through newspapers. So Hitler took this opportunity to actually discuss about the aims of the Nazi parties and what he thought, especially the 25-point program. And it's considered that it's thought that the judges were so impressed that they gave him such a light sentence, and he only ended up serving 9 months, and that wasn't in some bad prison. It was actually in the Landsberg Castle. Hitler served a prison sentence in a castle. This was very significant. Now, while Hitler was in jail, this is like a very important thing. So while Hitler was in jail, he had realized one specific thing. That was that if Hitler and the Nazis, they wanted to take over Germany or Bavaria, it would not be through force and aggression, as they would be stormed on, right? Both socially by the people and by the government. So what they thought, he realized, was that it wouldn't have to be through aggression or force, but actually through the Reichstag. That was the German parliament. So they had to gain votes in the Reichstag legally and well, they had to win the support of the people instead of just trying to barge in and take over the government. This is what Hitler realized. Now, while Hitler was in the castle as his quote unquote punishment, what he did was he wrote this book called Mein Kampf. I'm sure you've heard of it. So he used this time in prison to write this book, Mein Kampf. It translates to My Struggle in English. Now, this book it actually clarified and presented his ideas about Germany's future. This book featured Hitler's past, Hitler's present, and what his aims for Germany were. This book actually quickly became a bestseller in Germany, and this increased the Nazi Party's popularity for the good, for in a positive way. So Hitler actually benefited a lot, profited from the sale of the book. Not just financially from the sale of the book, but actually also the Nazi Party and Hitler as a person in general. The right thing loved Hitler, and people actually started to vote for Hitler more in the Reichstag.